The first biotech to market with a cancer vaccine is not likely to be who you think it will be. I'm Rachel Williamson, and this is Phase 3. Moderna and BioNTech are getting all of the attention with their Phase 3 clinical trials for a form of lung cancer and melanoma. But someone else is already further ahead. French company Ose Immunotherapeutics has already done a Phase 3 study, and if the final run of work confirms that data, it will have the first cancer vaccine on the market in 2028. CEO Nicolas Poirier says the holy grail is rewiring the immune system, and especially for people for whom the shiny new tools of immunotherapy simply don't work. And it's results like those emerging from Ose that are inspiring investors to start getting set for a cancer-vaxxed future. But Nicolas comes in a little later in our final episode of VAXXED, as first up we have Dr. Jeannie Joughin, a partner with venture investor OneVentures. She personally talent-spotted Imverix, which we featured in episode 2, and she has her eye on a couple of very, very early-stage biotechs, but she wouldn't be drawn on revealing her hand just yet. So instead I asked her about the vibe amongst investors for cancer vaccine biotechs today. After all, there are the exciting mRNA developments and those results from Ose. But as the Financial Times put it, there are also 2 decades of crushing disappointments.
There have been so many advances in cancer research, and I would say particularly since COVID as well, the whole advent of the mRNA technology has really reinvigorated the field. And I think there's a lot of excitement. We have more understanding of neoantigens, and we have great understanding of some cancers and the absolutely phenomenal success of the preventative vaccines, Gardasil and Cervarix and the HPV vaccines as well for liver cancer prevention. The sales of the products are very good. The uptake with the market is very good, and that propels the investor interest. And then there's a lot of government and foundation interest in cancer, and they're funding through grants a lot of bench research that people are going in and effectively creating companies from.
Are you seeing excitement amongst investors in Australia, or is it largely a global vibe, if you like?
I think there's a global excitement on immuno-oncology products, and also because it's also driven by Big Pharma as well, because as they outsource their internal R&D, they look locally, they look globally as well. I would say there are a few companies that are developing products within Australia as well. I also believe that companies in the universities spin-outs are quite well funded and are being better funded.
It's clear that for investors, cancer vaccines are back again. But what I wanted to know was how big is the opportunity they're buying into? The preventative vaccines are worth about $8 to $10 billion a year. But Jeannie thinks the analysts might be undercooking just how much bigger this market could become if therapy vaccines succeed.
There's several reputable market research reports out there, and they've analysed the products that are in development and where they think the growth will come from. And they're anticipating that within 10 years' time, the market will be worth, say, $30 to $40 billion. Now, that's going to be because as a result of some of these products that are in development. Now, on one side of the coin, let's take that with a grain of salt because they are predicting very, very, very high pricing for those products. And that's driven by the US market because the US market can demand and receive a high price. But on the other side, I think they have underestimated the number of products that might make it in the next 10 years because of the rapid evolution and the changing way that we're evaluating the efficacy of these vaccines. And because of the advances we've made in the development of the melanoma vaccine, the colorectal cancer vaccine, other prostate cancer vaccines.
How many more vaccines you think might actually make it to market compared to what they've estimated?
I think it's a little bit of a result of all of the big data that we have to analyse and the speed at which we can analyse that data. So we get the cancer from an individual patient, we sequence it, and we can see all of the neoantigens. You know, in one of the vaccines that's being developed for melanoma, for example, there's 34 neoantigens in that vaccine, and they've identified them as the most immunogenic based on the analysis with the improved technology and AI. Now, imagine if that evolves, then they optimize the treatment. What about you get rid of the bulk of the cancer by resection, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, if you like, if it's possible, and then you use the vaccine as the surveillance mechanism to go around and mop up all that residual malignancy. And that's the advances that will come. And that's why there'll be many cancer vaccines, because it is personalised therapy rather than off the shelf. Or you could decide to develop an off-the-shelf therapy. You're going to have lower remission rates and you may not have a cure.
But personalised medicine is expensive and we're in an era of ever-tightening budgets. And yet, this investor at least thinks this option is now on the table for public and private health buyers. Jeannie holds a contrarian view about the prospects for cancer vaccines as personalised medicine.
I think that the cost can come down considerably for these individualised vaccine therapies for patients because the cost of mRNA, and the other thing about the mRNA, it speeds up the development of the vaccine. So what used to take 6+ weeks with the cell-based therapies is only taking less than 3 weeks because it's just quicker. It just goes in and it transcribes and it's just much quicker. So you've got 3 weeks worth of less of costs involved as well as the technology being cheaper itself too. So I think the cost will be able to come down considerably and you will be able to have that personalised vaccine. And when something takes 3 weeks, that's not an unacceptable methodology. It's not like someone's disease is going to get out of control in that time either.
Even ovarian and pancreatic cancer, which moves so fast, is still not going to kill you in just 3 weeks.
And, the other thing I think is in the future, if it bears out that maybe a cancer vaccine is better given to prevent relapse and prevent further disease, we could have a whole change in the way products are reimbursed in the future too. Like, why wouldn't the government say, okay, I'm going to reimburse X for the remission of this cancer? Now, no matter how you get there, this is what you're going to get. And then that would encourage companies with their different modalities to package the best treatment that will be most likely to create a cure in that patient, and they get the reimbursement. So it's not drug by drug. And it would encourage combination therapy used optimally and to get the optimal results for the patient.
Reimbursement is a tricky one. As we've heard, even Jeannie, with her long experience of oncology, isn't quite sure where they might fit into the future mix of cancer therapies. There are other hurdles that must also be overcome to get a cancer vaccine to market. The biggest one is the limitations of working with biological substances. Cancer is stealthy. A therapy must be tailored to the right target on a tumour, delivered to the right place, and make sure the cancer can't mute the immune system. It has a lot to do. But what could be the big decider is what investors will fund, Jeannie says.
Whether we do personalised vaccines or we go for an off-the-shelf version and accept that we're not going to get 100% remission and we might go for stable disease, that's another hurdle, I think, because that'll determine which activities we fund and which activities we don't fund.
Where will this modality be in 50 years' time?
I think it'll be commonplace. I think it'll only take 20 to 30 years, actually, because of the speed at which we're discovering factors that either stop the immune response from responding or the triggers that are causing the mutations. So I think in the next 20 to 30 years, there'll be many vaccines. And because of the move to therapeutic vaccines and personalised medicines, there will be many because each individual will probably have their own. And in 50 years, it'll be commonplace. But as I said, I don't believe that cancer will go away. I think as long as we're living longer and cells are going to continue to divide and mutate, we just might have the advent of new variations.
That's terrifying. New variations of cancer.
Well, it's like we have new viruses popping up all the time too, right? But we know how to treat them. Case in point, COVID. Well, we haven't eradicated COVID, but we do know how to minimise its effects. So again, I believe that's how cancer will be as well, because we just need to get that immune system switched on and not switched off by that enemy within. And I think that's when we'll have a hope of being able to cure some forms of cancers in some people.
That was Dr. Jeannie Joughin, venture partner at biotech investor OneVentures. She thinks cancer vaccines will be bigger and cheaper than anyone expects, and she's leaning towards mRNA to do the heavy lifting. But our next guest after this break is in the peptide game.
Hi there, I'm Charis Palmer, producer of Phase 3. When Rachel and I set about building a new podcast for life science leaders, scientists and long-suffering biotech investors, we looked at what was missing in this space. We believe Phase 3 serves an unmet need for in-depth conversations in a world where nuance matters and AI-written investment articles simply won't cut it. If you agree, please follow us and sign up to our newsletter via LinkedIn. Pledge financial support at phase3.buzzsprout.com and rate and review the podcast on the podcast platform you use to help bring it to the attention of others. Now back to the show.
Ose means to dare in French. For Ose Immunotherapeutics CEO Nicolas Poirier, it's a word that transforms into something else entirely in the context of what they're trying to achieve. To explore the frontiers of science and to dare for patients. He says the emergence of mRNA during the pandemic opened people's eyes to the way a vaccine could adapt to a virus and how it might be able to do the same for tumour antigens. But the French biotech's vaccine, Tedopi, is not mRNA. It uses protein fragments called epitopes to stimulate T-cell production. It targets 5 antigens and is an off-the-shelf treatment rather than a personalised medicine. And it is leading the race to market in non-small cell lung cancer, the same as what BioNTech and Moderna are leading with. And yet, even after Jeannie's excitement and 4 episodes of investors, analysts, scientists and executives saying, this time, it really is different, I can't shake the fact that different iterations of cancer vaccines have been this close before and failed. So I asked Nicolas, who is closest to touching the Holy Grail, is it really different this time? And if so, why?
I think several things have changed this last year. So 2 elements I think will be key for the success of cancer vaccines. One is, first, it's a learning curve and we have learned a lot. So now we know better why they failed in the past. We know better the immune system of the patients and the tumor antigens. So now we can select the same tumor antigen but engineer them in the lab, having several rounds of iterations of engineering tested. And this is what we have done to have a cancer vaccine with different antigens that have been engineered to be very foreign for the immune system. So the immune system can be really activated against these tumor antigens.
And what's your second?
The second one, which is really important, is now we know better the patients. In the past, we treat all the patients. Now, with the revolution of immunotherapy, we can select patients that previously benefit from immunotherapy. So it means that these patients have lost the battle, the first battle, the immune system works, attacks the tumors, but they lose the first battles. It does not mean they have lose the war. We need to refresh the pool of soldiers, and this vaccine can prime and arm new soldiers, send new soldiers on the battlefield, and we can revitalize their immune response.
What about patients who don't respond to immunotherapy? What's the option for them?
So we can design better vaccines with RNA or peptides, quicker, cheaper, better antigens, and we can test, engineer in the lab, and select the patients that are most likely to respond to these innovations.
You just mentioned the pandemic and mRNA therapies. These have clearly supercharged interest, particularly from investors in cancer vaccines. But all of these vaccine methods have their own advantages and disadvantages. So if you can speak as an objective observer, leading a company that has an asset at the forefront of this, which category do you think is likely to dominate the cancer vaccine field if they can get up?
Yeah, it's a very excellent question. So for sure, right now, the RNA vaccine are under the spotlight after the pandemic. They have advantages for sure. It's quite cheap in terms of manufacturing. It's really versatile. We can produce very rapidly. That's definitively a very good advantage.
And investors love them.
Yeah, there is some trend, fashions. There is definitively advantage. There is also weakness, which is today it's really poor predictivity of the good antigens. When we look at the response against the vaccines, is not so broad, not so strong, but definitively it will provide probably benefits, in particular at early stages of the disease after surgery. So it's a mix between preventing relapse or regrowth of the tumor. So I think that's really interesting for the personalized approach due to the versatility of the technology. In the conferences, the majority of the talks and the new technologies are not based on RNA. There is still a huge interest on the DNA, on the peptide, on the cell, and so on. And in particular for the peptides, they are off the shelf, ready to use. That's a big advantage, in particular for the metastatic disease patients. When the tumors is progressing, we have no time. We have no time to wait for weeks to manufacture the vaccines. We need something that is ready to use right now, and we need a vaccine that is really strong.
It sounds like you're saying it's the form that matters, not the technology. So off the shelf will be better for some cancers than personalised, and peptides will be better for some patients over mRNA and so on. Does that sound correct?
All technologies have their own advantage, and we need to explore and to play with all of these technologies for the benefit of patients. And probably some technology will have more advantage in one clinical settings, or one type of patients. It will be different in other type of patients.
And then there are the companies which are mixing the different therapies.
Sure.
Mutant cancer vaccines, if you like. Tell me about Tedopi, which is your cancer vaccine. I understand you could have it on the market as early as 2028.
Yeah.
And that would mean you'd be the first with a modern therapy cancer vaccine. So tell us about what the results are saying, what your expectations are for this phase 3 registrational global trial, and what could prevent you from getting there.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. So, Tedopi is currently the most advanced therapeutic cancer vaccine in development. We're running a second pivotal phase 3 in Europe, North America, Canada, UK, and so on. We are targeting 2028. This is our ambitions to register Tedopi, but not only Tedopi, open the door for additional new cancer vaccine technologies. And this is to date the only one vaccine that demonstrated its clinical efficacy in randomized trials.
I think your competitors might have something to say about that.
The others are still demonstrating very promising results, but in phase 2, non-randomized. What we have demonstrated in a randomized phase 3, that in nearly half of the patients, we have demonstrated that the vaccine alone in monotherapy extends significantly survival versus the patient that receive only chemotherapy. The 1 year survival was 44% for Tedopi and 27% for chemo. So it's a big change in terms of survival. What I think is really important is threefold less toxicity, adverse events. So the patients survive longer and better with less toxicity. And this translated in a very good quality of life. And this is better, of course, in advantage of the vaccines compared to chemo. So just because we have a better tumor control, less toxicity, at the end, the patients live better.
Longer and better is definitely a more hopeful outcome when you're living with a disease as nasty as some of these forms of cancer. You're in the final phase 3 leg with secondary resistance lung cancer. That's when one immunotherapy has been tried and the tumour becomes resistant to it. What does the timeline look like for this?
We think that in the next 3 years, we will have the results by 2027, if everything goes well, and then registration for 2028. So this is our target, our ambitions indeed.
And what could stop you getting there?
What could stop? I think significant regulatory modifications. We align on the rules, so we need to make sure that the rules are not changing during we are playing the games, for sure. So regulatory stability is key. For sure, we need to enroll patients. This is always a challenge, but now we have I think, a really strong support for the medical community, both in US and Europe. They are really confident that the data we have generated. And then what we could stop is if we don't confirm the results. Of course, it will prevent registrations, but it will mean that the technology is not working like we predict or like we want. So right now, the things are on track.
Are you concerned at all about regulatory stability in the US?
I don't know if we don't have any particular concerns right now, but we know that we are living in a world of development that is long. We are speaking about decades to develop drugs. So if we are changing the rules every 2 years or every 3 years, we align on the strategy, and then if the things are changing, that's not possible. So that's really important. This is a message that we would like to report is stability and regulatory is really important. Because at the end, it's not only about winning or being the first or winning more money. Is patients that have very high unmet needs and that needs innovations. So for that, we need to have really clear regulatory paths for the benefit of the patients at the end.
Just touching on that idea of being the first, non-small cell lung cancer is a really competitive market for cancer vaccines. It seems like this is on everyone's radar for clinical trials. So how much pressure are you feeling to be the first one to get that market share, to get it on the market?
It's a lot of pressure, for sure. As a CEO of a small biotech in a very big world, facing big companies with big investments and big competitions, is of course a lot of pressure. But yeah, this is what we have to do. We have built the company for that, and we will do it. I think we have advantage. We are really agile and flexible. So far, unfortunately for the patients, all the competitors failed in terms of demonstrating better survival for the patients. So far, there is nothing registered, and all the molecules except our vaccine for the moment failed in extending survival for the patients. So it gave us a lot of energy and duty to pursue for the patients that need to have access to these innovations. And it's not a surprise that there is so much competition. Non-small cell lung cancer is maybe one or the second cancer type in terms of incidence. It's the first one, unfortunately, in terms of mortality. And this is where the cancer vaccine can play a big role in the future.
Yeah, and if something like Tidopi is getting 50% of the patients, and perhaps one of the other methods, dendritic cells, DNA, mRNA maybe could even get that other 50%. Now, if Ose can be the first to commercialize a cancer vaccine with Tidopi, what do you think that will do for the broader cancer market?
I think it will be a big change because it's a holy grail from decades that, in theory, our immune system has been built to recognize the viruses, infected cells, cancer cells. And so we are sure that tomorrow, but this was also the case in the past, we will cure patients with our immune system. So it's a big up. And if our vaccine or another one succeed, it will definitively demonstrate this one. the right path to move forward. It will open a new avenue, clearly open a new doors in a new world where we can also envisage chemotherapy-free regimen for patients. I think that's a big change for the patients. No more chemotherapy and replaced by more efficient modalities.
Where will cancer vaccine therapy be in 50 years' time, do you think?
50, you said? Wow.
Let your imagination go.
Yeah. Now I have my own hope, the Holy Grail. I think first, maybe in 10, 15 years, I'm quite pretty sure, quite confident that we will have these cancer vaccines, therapeutic cancer vaccines. So let's say in the 10, 20 years, chemotherapy-free regimens. 50 years, we have all hope, prevent cancers. We know that with Gardasil, we can prevent cervix cancers if we have good technologies, good platform, very well tolerated. We know now very well the shared tumor antigens, or tomorrow the shared neoantigens. We will have the possibility to vaccinate preventively the patients with high risk of disease, high risk of developing cancers. Let's speak about the smokers in lung cancers. We can vaccinate preventively in the future, or we will.
People living in heavily polluted cities.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's key because today the cure against metastatic disease is difficult because we are treating too late. If we can vaccinate preventively, eliminate the tumor cells at inception from the beginning, it will open not only a chemotherapy-free world, but hopefully a cancer-free world.
That was Ose Immunotherapeutics CEO, Nicolas Poirier. The cancer vaccine boom times began with Gardasil. Sure, there were vaccines that came before, but it really began with that preventative breakthrough. Today, 2 decades on since efforts began in earnest, biotechs are still trying. And this time they might finally come up with an answer researchers have been looking for so long. A vaccine that can help a patient's own body find and hunt down tumour cells and then inoculate them against a return of the cancer for years afterwards.